It was always going to be difficult for the Marvels to be the enormous hit that Captain Marvel was. This, quite frankly, isn't the MCU Phase 3. We are not building towards Endgame. We are not coming off the resounding high that was Infinity War, and the momentum just really isn't there. Plus, I think Brie Larson's Captain Marvel has kind of been exposed. That's really hard to root for. It's not the greatest performance in the world, and I don't think they really made the character really endearing in that opening movie. It's also associated with the Miss Marvel Disney Plus show, which is the lowest viewed Disney Plus MCU show of all time. They put it on ABC. Also broke records there for the lowest audience for any type of Marvel property on that channel. It did not work out there, although some people had already seen the show. And then it's also tying in, I guess, to WandaVision from Disney Plus, which was actually pretty darn successful. I think that was the first show that they had out. But it's also tying into Secret Invasion, and that one was not the hit that WandaVision was. It was more like the hit that Miss Marvel wasn't. So there are a lot of things working against it, but there was always a likelihood that it was going to turn a profit because of the $130 million budget that really, quite frankly, for a superhero movie made for release in 2023 wasn't that big. It wasn't nearly as astronomical as Thor Love and Thunder or Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. It certainly wasn't The Flash. It wasn't Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, where they have these enormous budgets to where you're going to have to make like 700, 800 million worldwide just to break even. And it turns out that budget number, $130 million, was not accurate. It was actually underreported. And the real budget number is much more in line with The Flash than Shazam! Fury of the Gods, that $130 million number is. And it's going to be much more difficult, and it's much more likely that the Marvels is actually going to lose money. There's an article on thedirect.com, and their movie math is a little off, so I'm going to clear this up, and I'm going to explain why they are way off. But the budget number apparently is real, and it's out right now. According to Forbes, the official budget for the Marvels is over $274 million, making it one of the most expensive MCU films to date. This comes as a bit of a surprise, seeing as how the movie is only rumored to be around 100 minutes in length, but the high cost is likely due to the extensive VFX work that will go into bringing it to life. However, Forbes also reported that Disney received a $55 million subsidy from the United Kingdom government while making the film, bringing the total amount spent on the Marvels down to around $220 million. In comparison, the budget of other MCU films, this $274 million mark makes the Marvels the fourth most expensive movie in the entirety of the MCU itself. Yes, there are only 3 MCU movies that cost more money to make than the Marvels: Avengers Endgame, Avengers Infinity War, and Avengers Age of Ultron. The original Avengers movie costs less than this one. The Spider-Man No Way Home movie costs less than this one. It's absolutely insane. How did you spend $275 million on Freaky Friday? Like, that is absolutely insane. Who even makes these kind of decisions? That is so much money. And yes, they did get a $55 million subsidy from the United Kingdom taxpayers, which is great for them because they only have to make up $220 million as far as the budget goes to make their money back. But that is a terrible position to be in. $220 million is a lot of money because you have to think of marketing budgets. There's probably reshoots, and a big movie, like the Marvels that's MCU related is going to be much more reliant on overseas box office rather than just the domestic box office, which means you have to make even more money to get your budget back because you get less of a return on foreign box office and stuff like that. It does not feel like a wise financial investment. It feels like someone made a mistake when they greenlit The Marvels, directed by Nia DaCosta, starring Brie Larson and Iman Vellani, for like almost $300 million. Absolutely insane. Due to the extremely pricey budget of The Marvels, it will be rather difficult for the film to be considered a huge financial success. To break even, the Marvels will have to grow somewhere around $450 million at the global box office, since theaters take a cut of the earnings. Yeah, that $450 million number is actually pretty spot on if there was no marketing budget. They didn't actually have to pay for that as well. It actually has to pay for the money that you sunk into it to actually tell people that it exists, which is normally about half the budget, if not more than that, of the actual production itself. So to make its money back worldwide, it probably has to make somewhere around $650 million, including the marketing budget, but probably closer to $700 million at a bare minimum, just to make their money back and not be in the red for this one. And we know that the MCU has lost so much money over the last couple of years. I believe it's like $900 million that they've lost on the film since, I believe, Spider-Man No Way Home. Even the successful movies, because the budgets have been so enormous, really haven't made money and they've actually started losing money, which at one point would have been unthinkable just for any MCU movie. Even if it was a bad MCU movie, there would be enough general interest in it because it was the MCU that it would be able to break even. But that is not the case anymore. They're actually losing money nowadays because there just really isn't that fervent interest in the MCU anymore, because you're not really heading toward anything. Maybe in 3 or 4 years, we're going to get out to this Kang War stuff, but who's looking forward to Kang? I just saw the guy get his ass kicked by Ant-Man. And I was told in the Ant-Man movie that Ant-Man ain't even tough. Like, he's a chump. They just undercut themselves at every single possible moment. And I don't think Kang was probably the right choice. I understand they enjoyed the Jonathan Majors performance in the Loki TV show. Well, I guess it wasn't TV, the Loki streaming show on Disney Plus. But it wasn't that good. They should have gotten a better villain, most notably Doctor Doom or perhaps Galactus to come in here. Although both of those villains are more related to the Fantastic Four, but those are enormous threats that people actually know. I don't think Kang is really on the mind of a whole lot of people. And we certainly didn't get the awesome introduction of Kang that we did to Thanos. You know, at the end of the first Avengers movie, when you finally see the guy that's pulling the strings, you're like, oh my goodness, he looks really dangerous. Jonathan Majors didn't come across as dangerous in Loki. Let's just put it that way. They continue to be viewed as a success in Disney's eyes. The Marvels will likely have to bring home at least $600 million, especially considering how profitable other Marvel Studios films have been in the past. This upcoming movie could definitely hit that number, especially if it resonates well with fans and word of mouth drives casual moviegoers to the theaters to see it. After all, Brie Larson's Captain Marvel ended up passing the $1 billion mark when it came out in 2019, so there's clearly an appeal to see her character in action. There's no denying that the first Captain Marvel movie made $1 billion back in 2019. But you also have to acknowledge the fact that it was sandwiched in between Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, and viewers were told, fans of the MCU were told specifically, you need to watch Captain Marvel to understand what happens in Avengers Endgame. Turns out that was a lie. You didn't need to see that movie. She barely even showed up in the damn thing anyway, and it was just a whole bait and switch to get people in the theaters that was, admittedly, very, very successful. But I don't think a lot of people look back on Captain Marvel and think, man, that was a really strong superhero movie. Wow, that was a great origin for the character. Man, I can't wait for more wooden Brie Larson on the big screen with a very stoic look on her face, not reacting or emoting to anything, and certainly not having a good time portraying Carol Danvers on the big screen. It looked like she wanted to be anywhere else in the world but that movie. Hell, she looked like that in Endgame. That's the biggest movie ever made in the history of Hollywood. That is the most successful movie ever in the history of the world, and she didn't want to be there. What are the chances that she actually wants to be in a Freaky Friday movie with the girl from the Miss Marvel TV show that no one's ever heard of? Not to mention all the strife behind the scenes. It sounds like the director, Nia DaCosta, who you likely haven't heard of, is fed up and never wants to make an MCU movie after this. She's a nobody, and she's had enough with the MCU. And apparently there was a lot of strife behind the scenes, specifically centered around Brie Larson and her wanting to be like the sole star of the movie and them having to put on extra people because they knew she couldn't carry a second movie. This is all by design. And of course, they're continuously going to remind you that it made $1 billion. They're never going to remind you that there were mitigating circumstances with Endgame and Infinity War that absolutely blew that box office up way bigger than it should have been, or the fact that the MCU was absolutely hot as could be. For the most part, they were hitting like 900 at that point. Yes, there was a stinker every now and again, but it was actually pretty rare at that point, and the MCU was just absolutely on fire, and it is not on fire today. Now, they do go on to explain why this movie is going to bomb, but it's not because of Brie Larson. It's actually because of Secret Invasion. However, it is a little worrisome due to the ties that Marvel's has with Secret Invasion, which was not viewed well at all in the eyes of viewers. The non-diehard MCU fans who watch Secret Invasion may feel as though there are too many connections between the two projects. If they still have a bad taste in their mouths from the Disney Plus show, viewers may elect to wait and watch the movie on streaming. The opening weekend for the Marvels will likely make a decent amount of money, but the second week numbers will be the most telling when predicting where the box office numbers will stand when the film is finished with its theatrical run. That's right. The reason no one's going to want to go see the Marvels is because Secret Invasion. It's Samuel L. Jackson's fault. It's the lady from Game of Thrones, Emilia Clarke. That's the reason people are going to be turned off by the Marvels. It's not that Brie Larson is coming back to play Captain Marvel, and although the movie did make a lot of money, it didn't exactly leave a positive impression in the minds of a lot of the moviegoers. It didn't exactly stand out as good, and she certainly didn't stand out as good in that role. It has nothing to do with the fact that Iman Vellani, who plays Miss Marvel, has already had her own show on Disney Plus and was far less successful than any other show in the history of the MCU on Disney Plus. And they put it on ABC, and nobody wanted to watch that shit there. It has nothing to do with the fact that major plot lines in this apparently tie into WandaVision, which also tied into Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. And it turned out playing those plot lines from WandaVision on the big screen wasn't the payoff that you wanted. It turned out it wasn't very good. There are so many things working against the Marvels. Brie Larson, number one, and the fact that everything else that's tying into this, people were interested in WandaVision, but now that we've seen some of the payoff, the juice wasn't exactly worth the squeeze. And not to mention the state that the MCU is in right now. What's the last good MCU movie that came out? Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which opened far less than they ever anticipated it would open to, and actually did do well because of word of mouth, because people realized it was a good movie and they decided to give it a chance. But almost all the other movies opened up about what you would have expected them to, and then they drop like a freaking rock once people realize they suck. This is going to be more of the same for the MCU. They were already likely to break even or lose money, and now that we know the budget was actually twice as big as initially reported, it's all but guaranteed they're going to lose money. It's just how much money are they going to lose on this thing? And there's been like a lot of really weird math, because this year, everyone can talk about Barbie, everyone can talk about Oppenheimer. Barbenheimer took over. Let's not forget about all the enormous flops that have already happened in 2023, and I imagine the Marvels is going to add to the pantheon of that. We've got The Flash, we've got Indiana Jones, hell, Fast X, and all these other movies. Mission Impossible lost tons of money at the box office. They ended up with really bloated, inflated budgets because of the COVID shutdowns, and they're absolutely drowning in losses at the box office. I broke it all down, and how Hollywood math, at least from a lot of these entertainment websites, is so far off it's not even funny. This was the year of the loser at the box office. Oppenheimer and Barbie were absolute anomalies in this box office in 2023. There's also a link in the video description.